Hello, my name is Ivan, and I just recently took the FAA written for private pilot, and I scored 100%. And I want to show or share with you how my approach, what I did to do that. I posted this actually on a Facebook student pilot group, and I did get a lot of questions on what did I do to prepare for this written test. And so that's what I'm going to do. So a couple of things up front. First thing is I'm going to show you exactly the products that I used, and I'm not financially connected with any of these companies. I didn't get anything for free. I paid for everything, and so there's no incentive for me, financial incentive for me to do this. The second thing is I'm a nurse practitioner, and before that a nurse, and before that a paramedic. So I'm extremely comfortable with this testing format. Where there's a number of questions. You go to a testing center, computer-based, and those kind of things. And so I'm comfortable with that, and I use some of my strategies from this kind of testing, and I found that it actually translated pretty well. So this is what I did. So the first thing that I did to begin preparation for the FAA written was I went to ground school. And the ground school that I chose was Checkride Prep. And the reason that I picked them initially was because, well, to be honest with you, it was free. And so, but why I stuck with them was for a couple of reasons. One, it's a live course, and that was awesome. So it was like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 hours a night. And there'd be chapters and assignments beforehand. You do the reading, and then you would show up, get the lecture from a live person, and you could ask questions. They had like a chat box thing going on the side. It wasn't like you were speaking over a microphone. It wasn't like a two-way Zoom thing. It was more, like I said, you had to type in your questions. And either the person presenting would answer, or they must have had people moderating the chat boxes, because then there'd be other people and they would respond to your questions. And sometimes the other students could respond to your questions. And so I found that it was nice. But it was also like you'd ask a question and you'd hear, Ivan, your answer is to this. So the presenter is reading these comments and respond to you individually. And I really liked that. It was very motivating. And at the end of the session, they would do like a Q&A and take questions, and that was very helpful too. So what's the catch? It's not really a catch, but the first, I'd say 20 minutes, good 20 minutes of the presentation, they did promote some of their other products, which I found to be very reasonable and not burdensome at all. And some of those products I was actually interested in, and in fact did end up purchasing. But the ground school portion was free. Live ground school with a human being where you could ask questions on the spot was free. Another benefit of the program is not only was it synchronous, but it could be asynchronous, meaning if you couldn't be there for the live presentation, they recorded those, and very quickly they'd have them up on their website. And so you could go back and watch the previous or any of the previous presentations if you needed to review one, even that you attended, or say you were late. You could go back and review the part that you missed. So I found that to be, it was perfect. It was perfect for my style of learning. That good combination of distance, synchronous and asynchronous, where I could get instant feedback on a question if I needed to. So that was ground school, and it's Checkride Prep, checkrideprep.com. I thought they were awesome, which is not to say there's not plenty of other good ground school options out there. There's some really good ones. I don't even think Checkride is the only free one, but I just felt like for what they had to offer, it was outstanding. So one of the things that they did was, I'm going to show you some of the books that I used. Checkride, what they essentially used a lot of the Ralph Machado stuff. So this was the book that they used for their course, and they would be assigned reading. You would read, and their illustrations and their slides were basically straight from the Ralph Machado stuff. Now, and I hate to say this, I had a real hard time with the Ralph Machado book. Rod Machado. I keep saying Ralph. The Rod Machado book. Sorry about that. And the information was great. The illustrations were great. I had a hard time getting past the humor because I'm kind of, busy, and sometimes the humor would go on for a paragraph or so, and I just wanted to get to the meat of it. I could see how people would like the humor. It's entertaining. It could keep you motivated. Mr. Machado has clearly demonstrated his vast knowledge of general aviation, and I'm just saying, for me, it was not a good fit. So what did I do? Well, I got this book, which is just the standard FAA book. It is definitely dry. There's no doubt about that. So I ended up using that a lot more. Of course, I feel like you have to get the testing supplement. This is the exact thing that you get at the FAA written. And it's got, pictures and diagrams and charts, and they referred to a diagram number. And so this was very helpful in my preparation. I mean, it's mandatory. I mean, you just have to do it. The other book that I got, and I ended up not using it, and I'll explain why here in a bit, is the Gleim FAA Knowledge Test Prep. And I ended up not using it. Like I said, I'll go into why, but this is a pretty good book. It's got tons of the FAA questions, and each chapter, and it's divided into chapters, units on a particular topic or concentration of, area of information and instruction. And each chapter it begins with an outline bullet style, block of instruction, and very concise, no depth at all, but very concise. So you could do that little brief overview and then answer the questions. And let me speak to that no depth. Part of the way I prepared was, if I didn't understand a question or the answer, I researched it, either with the FAA book, the Machado book. Far more often than that, it was, YouTube research, Facebook student pilot group research, and my instructor, my CFI. I wanted to know, not just memorize a response. I wanted to have understanding of it. And that, I feel like, I can't overstate enough, was how come I did so well. Was not just rote memorization, but understanding the topic matter. And if I didn't understand a question, if I didn't understand how to do a computation, I went and just spent tons of time till I understood the process behind it, till I understood the math behind it. And that was, like I said, very critical. Now, the next big thing that I did, so there was ground school, I had some texts. The next big thing that I did was sign up for the Gleim, basically electronic version of the book that I just showed you. And I want to say it was like $60. It's not ground school. I think they have a ground school too, but this is just basically the questions. And I ended up also purchasing another book from them, and that was their pilot handbook. It is also in bullet form and outline form, but it has far more depth. It goes way deeper than just the basic outline. And I said that I didn't need to purchase the first book, and here's why. It is almost, and I didn't know this at the time, it is completely contained within this, this information that you could purchase. So it says read the ebook. And so if you click on that, and it takes you to, whatever, and you click on that, and then it breaks it down again, and, you click on that, and it gives you an outline, maybe an illustration, and this is the exact same material that's presented in their test prep book. It is the same. And the questions are the same. So really, I'm advising against the test prep book, but for their pilot handbook, because this goes more in depth. And between this, the Machado, and the FAA book, and YouTube and all that, I was able to get the in-depth understanding, and not just the simple memorizing the responses. But it was nice to have this little refresher. And so basically what you would do is you would create a study session, and I'll just kind of do that real quick. And you could pick, one or more, it would break it down into, little topics, subtopics, and, you could click on that and hit next. And what order I would do, random order, click next again, and it'll ask you the number of questions that you want to do, and then you answer the questions and you move through it. And so, like so many of the programs do, you go through, you answer the question. If you get it right, great. If not, you mark it and you go on to the next question. It then gives you the option at the end of the cycle. So if I'm just randomly clicking, as it turned out, I got that right. So there, I got that wrong, and I'm just clicking. I'm not even looking at stuff. I'm just clicking. So once you got through with the test, it would ask to grade it. Tells you what you missed. You could go back and basically just review the questions that you missed. And that was very helpful. So you go back and just review the questions that you missed. So what I did was, section by section, I went through each and every question. I would review the in-depth outline, and then go through and answer the questions. And if I missed stuff, I went back and looked at what I missed and why, and then I would, do it again. Once you're done, one thing that this program does that's really cool is you can create a test. I have to discard the session. You can create a test where basically you can, after you get to a certain point, there's 900 questions in this bank. I went through every question at least once. In the end, I went through them a bunch of times. But what you can do is you can do a different thing where you can do a customized approach, select all, or break it down by section and subsection. And then you can click it to where you only want to see the ones that you missed from all sessions. And then it would put together, these are all the questions that you missed at one point, and you could select all and come over here and hit next. and random order, hit next again. And, it's 231 questions that I missed. And I could literally just go through the questions that I missed. And I found this to be really, really helpful. Okay, so I went through those simultaneously, looking up topics that I was weak in and, getting the depth. So I went through all those questions. It ended up being multiple times. Simultaneously, I also purchased an app. And the app, I have to look it up because I always forget. The app is called Private Pilot Test Prep. And it's by Flightready. Flightready Private Pilot Test App. And I was going to do a screen share, but it actually has a thing where it will not let you screen share or broadcast. And I have iOS. I don't know if this is available for Android. But I downloaded this program to both my phone and an iPad. And what I like about this, it's the same questions, exact same questions that the Gleim program has. But what it does that's different, and I'll share this with you. I just took a picture of the screen, so I don't know how you're going to be able to see this or not. You can put filters on the style of questions. And what I did was I filtered out all the questions that had images. And you may ask, why would you do that? Why would you filter out all the questions that had images? And the reason being is, my phone, it goes everywhere with me. So wherever I was, if I had a few minutes, I'd pop open that app, filter out the questions that had images, which means you're pretty much only getting those knowledge-based questions. I don't carry around, my plotter and my testing supplement and, my, E6B. I don't do that. So I don't have time to do all those things. But for the rest of the just plain old ask a question, pick the response, it worked great. And it filters out about a third. About a third or maybe even more. I guess about a third had images. So I was able to completely just focus on those questions because, again, while I'm in the bathroom, while I'm, waiting in line for something, even at work, I could, if I'm on a break or whatever, I could have my iPad up or have my phone out and just kind of basically just chick through the questions. And then later when I would get home, I would use the Gleim online version to go through the stuff that actually had the images. I've got a desk and I was able to, put out all my supplies and work through it like that. So just, again, it's Flightready Private Pilot Prep. Again, I know it's available for iPhone and iPad, but I don't know if it's available for Android. So unfortunately, if that's not the case. So that's the apps that I use. I also purchased, one of these, E6B, a plotter, and I ended up getting the CX3 ASA electronic, this is what I used on the test. I very early into my studies, I decided I was not going to try to gain significant proficiency. I worked through each problem at least once with the mechanical version. It's very cumbersome. It takes a lot of time. And it has a calculator. It's allowed. Was just much better. There's only one thing that I use the mechanical E6B on, and it's kind of cool. So if you take this out, you basically have a compass with the headings. And what I did use this for, and it turns out that this question ended up being on my exam, is there's a VOR question. And I believe it gives you, the plane is heading to, it's on 253 heading to, where's the plane, that kind of thing. And this, I've figured out a little technique that you can take, pretend like this is your vector or your approach, and I was able to use this to answer some VOR questions, just as otherwise you could draw it out. But that's it. And it only ended up being one question on the exam. But I've, in my studies, I used it for others. But I did not use it as a standard, E6B. Everything was with this. And I just got used to using it. I know there's a Sporties version out there. I don't know which is better. This is a few bucks more. The general word seems to be that this is better, but I have no actual, experience with the Sporties version. It may be just fine. So that was that. Now, I scheduled my date, which gave me, I'm the kind of guy that if I don't have a race to run in, I don't train. So I wanted to schedule a date with a deadline to motivate me to be ready. But I wanted to wait till I felt kind of okay about it. And I had already passed for Checkride Prep. I had already passed and gotten my endorsement. So I knew I'd probably at least pass, but I wanted to do well. But I finally did schedule, and I want to say I gave myself like 3 or 4 weeks when I scheduled it. And what I did from that point was I'd already been through all the questions, probably, like I said, 2 to 3 times, some of them 6 or 7 times, maybe even more. Learned my in-depth things if I didn't understand. And by that point, things were starting to gel. I'm the kind of guy that the more I'm exposed to it, the more it starts to connect, the more it starts to sink in. And at this point, it's not just memorizing, I'm understanding. And so, but it takes me, I have to be shown this information several times. And it's a lot. It was a lot of information, 900 questions. And so as I'm getting closer and closer, though, I'm starting to, go through things more and more. And I ended up making some flashcards for a few things that I just wasn't getting, like that are just memorization. For example, the signal lights, things like that. I probably had like 20 flashcards of some very specific things that I was just having a little problems with. That was very helpful. And now it's a couple of days before the test. And there's 2 things that I do differently from some people. But it's worked for me over the years. Again, I told you I was a paramedic, and I am a nurse and a nurse practitioner. And so it's worked for me where other people say, don't do it. 1, I literally studied up until the moment I got out of the car to go take my test. The day before, I went through the Gleim, where I had checked the box for only the stuff I had missed. And I went through that several times. And then literally the day of, I went to bed early, and the day of, got up early. My test was scheduled for 1:30 in the afternoon. It was 35 minutes away. So I literally got up on the day of, loaded up the Gleim, loaded up every single question, and this time didn't do it randomly, did it in order from 1 to 900. And I just flew through it. Click, 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 getting them. I was getting them all right by that time. If it was a computation question, I did the first one, but then the ones after that, I didn't do those. I just wanted to kind of, and some I skipped entirely, some I just skim read. So I didn't do all 900, but I think I got up to like 750 or 800. And then I had to drive to the test, sitting in the parking lot. I got there about 45 minutes too early, sat in the car, pulled it up on my iPad, and on still the Gleim thing, and just kept going through. I think, like I said, I got up to like question, like it was probably 800. I didn't answer all 800 before. Some of them I just skipped through. If it was stuff that by this point I'd answered a bunch, I knew it, I had it. But literally up until the moment that I stepped out of the car to go check in, I was answering questions. As it turned out, probably 4 questions that I was reminded of, because here's the one thing. If you're focusing just on the questions that you missed, then there may be questions that you got right that you haven't looked at in a while. So as it turned out, there were probably 3 or 4 questions that I had reviewed that morning that were very similar or exactly were on the test. So I'm very glad that I did that. That's the first thing that I did. Some people say, once you get to a point, you're just going to overload. Don't keep studying. That's not me. I study up until the final moment. Second thing that I do is I'm an answer changer. People say don't change your answers. I change my answers. And I had 2 questions on the test that I was absolutely like going, I'm not sure about. And I looked at them and I ended up changing one answer and leaving the other. And so as I got 100%, it was a good call on my part. And the way I was able to get the answer to change my answer was I was able to rationalize through it. I wasn't just relying on memory. I was like, okay, what is the fundamental way that this question works? What's it asking? And I was able to use that and not just go, oh my gosh, what was in the study guide? And it paid off. And that definitely paid off. Just a little bit about the test itself. They let you take in this, and this. You're allowed to take that in. They give you one sheet, or at least where I took it, they gave you one sheet of scratch paper. It was this pink sheet of paper. But then they also gave you a clear transparency and a dry erase marker and an eraser. So you could do your computations and then erase that. So you had plenty of scratch paper. I went through each question as I was answering it. I double, triple checked as I went. I went through, I answered it, went back, looking at each individual component. I mean, this is really nitpicky, but this is what I did. And just worked through each question, each component, making sure, doubling that I was on the right page in the testing supplement, because several times in my practicing, I was befuddled why I couldn't get the answer right, and turns out I was on the wrong chart. So I would double, triple check that everything was working. Then I'd go back and do it all again on the same question before I went to the next question. So if I didn't get the same answer, then something was wrong. So I did that, and I did that, and I did that all the way through. I felt really good while I was doing it. I got to the end, and I still had like an hour and like 40 minutes. It was like 2.5 hours, and I was like right at like, I don't know, maybe I had about an hour left, an hour and 10 minutes, something like that. It took me about 90 minutes to get to where I was done. Well, I had the time. I went back and worked through every single question again. And this time it was faster. It's already there, but I had time to double check everything. I went through it again. And so it was, each question was really looked at. And I felt very good about it. The questions I felt like were what I had prepared for. And I feel like it paid off. So that's what I did to score how I scored, which was 100% on the FAA written. Again, ground school, some good texts, and the texts that I liked were the Gleim Pilot Handbook, the FAA book, and I did use the Machado book, but I didn't use it as much as I thought, and the testing supplement. If you don't understand something, reach out to, there's just tons of information out there, but understand the question. Don't just try to, I'm going to memorize everything and just then learn it later. Learn it now. If you're studying for the FAA, don't, that's just my approach. Again, this is just what worked for me. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to answer them in the comments box, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But hopefully this will be helpful or encouraging to you guys. Don't be, one thing before I go, don't be anxious about the test, and here's why. Like I said, there's about 900 questions or more in the test bank. And these topics, these individual topics, can be very big and they can be very daunting. My hard one was weather. Weather was the one that I think I struggled with the most. And there's a lot of questions in the bank about it. And so I did. I had to spend probably an inordinate amount of time on the weather. But here's the thing. The test itself is only 60 questions. And they only put a few questions from each section, each area of knowledge makes it to the test. So even if I just completely blew the weather questions, it'd only be a few questions. So if you're where you're just absolutely, your test time is approaching and you have to take it or whatever, do understand that, it's not like they put 30, 15, 20 questions about weather on the test. They don't. They only put a few questions from each. So they have a lot of topics to cover. So the distribution of test questions is such that, each thing is kind of small. So again, hopefully this was helpful. Have a question, put it below. And thanks for sticking through this.